just kind of stirring the pot a little bit, seeing if we can come up with some new ideas. So I think we can jump right in, really. Um, Barb, since you have to go, your punishment is you should go first.
Okay, Lawrence. Well, thank you for accommodating Emily Dickinson and her 190th birthday.
Yeah.
um, well, this was kind of a hard assignment for me because,
Yeah.
as most of you know, I've been kind of laid up the last 6 or 8 months. And so I have been the recipient of many acts of kindness.
Mm.
And in a debilitated condition, it's kind of hard to figure out how you can carry out the rest of the assignment.
Mm.
I guess I want to share some of the acts of kindness that I've been privileged to have been the recipient of. And the first and foremost is that I think last week we talked about um, Naima had sent me some journaling books for the people here at All Saints.
Mm.
And I had also talked privately to Ann Mullen, our executive director,
Mm.
about the One Book South Dakota and if there were any um, extra books laying around in Brookings that we're sort of redoing the library here at All Saints, and we were looking for some different books. Some of the books had been here for more than 30 years.
Mm.
And with the people kind of really confined to their rooms and in lockdown most of the time, um, the hours and days are very long. Well, Anne sent me two huge boxes of books, which brightened my day. And took them down to the library, and we have a little committee of residents who sorted the old books and who have sort of displayed the new books. And it was really fun to see some of these people perk up because they had something meaningful to do. And so, simply just some books were wonderful. And I kind of played a very small part in that. I was like the relayed the message, and I was the recipient. But it was also really cool to see the response of the people who now, are their intellectual lives are beginning to perk up again. So I wanted to thank all the people who have extended acts of kindness to me. And I'm still trying to figure out in this situation how I can do a random act of kindness since we're basically pretty isolated.
Mm. 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 Interesting. Can you say a little bit more, Barb, about some of the reactions that people got, you saw to the
Oh,
book?
well, some of them were just in shock that somebody would remember them here because some of the people don't have families close by. Um, they have not been able to have visitors since last March. Uh, and we're not eating in the dining room. I mean, it's pretty much COVID jail,
Mm.
even though we're all testing negative,
Mm.
but I guess they want to keep it that way.
Exactly.
And so just the um, pleasure of being remembered by someone
Mm.
who they don't know you guys. I kind of
Mm.
know you, but they don't know you.
Mm.
And so it was really nice to see some smiles,
Mm.
and which had been a very drab and sort of depressing environment.
Mm.
That just some books, and some of them were uh, South Dakota One books for 15 years ago,
Mm.
but they were new to the people here. And
Mm.
so we've now started to talk about maybe doing a one book discussion
Mm.
uh, based on some of the books that were sent.
Mm.
With the technology now, we can do a Zoom meeting with some of you guys,
Mm.
okay? And so I think it sort of had a ripple effect.
Mm,
And, like I said, it was just really very much appreciated.
mm, mm. Well, I think you really hit on something really important about the ripple effect too. I mean, there are a few things in there that you were saying that were really important, but I want to focus for a minute or two on that the whole idea of a ripple effect, because sometimes we're so focused on cause and effect as singular mutual events, if that makes any sense to anyone, that we forget that no act ends with its first interaction. You know, everything we do has these ripple effects that go way into the future, and they kind of bounce off other things. You know, we talk about cause and effect, but there's no cause that causes a singular effect. There are always multiple effects, and every cause is caused by multiple effects. So it's not like you do one, it's not a one-to-one relationship. It's a multiple to multiple relationship. So whenever we do these acts of kindness, it's not just that thing and then there's some transaction where you get some that feedback. That's just the beginning. It's just the thing that's tangible at that moment. Because one, for example, other people see that act of kindness. Some people, for example, their resistance to doing something for others is lowered because they may be thinking that, well, it's everybody's in it for themselves, nobody ever does anything for me or something like that. When you do that, it may not turn them completely around, but it weakens that idea that they're all by themselves, and especially like in the case that you were talking about, Barb, where people are in, as you put it, COVID jail. Then that sense of loneliness can be intensified. So just having someone say, "Hey, I can. Hey, could you use this?" And or something like that means a great deal. So I'm glad you brought that out.
Well, like I said, it was a really wonderful experience. And, I think that the ripple effect is not ended, at least here,
Mm, mm,
because we now have people either by phone or furtive conversations in the hallway when nobody's looking, are discussing, what books they want to discuss and
mm,
what are the possibilities of how do we do a Zoom meeting, and how do we get other people from outside this community back integrated into
mm,
um, this community. We're not all 95 and senile.
mm,
Some of us are, but most of us aren't.
mm,
And this has been a very, very difficult time, especially with the holidays coming up.
mm,
And, nobody can have any visitors, and it's very difficult.
mm,
So you never know
mm.
what, some books can do for people.
Yes, right, right. Well, thank you for that, Barb. Um, Anyone else wants to go next?
I'd like to.
Go
I,
ahead.
I wanted to say that I appreciate what Barb and you have just said, because that ripple effect is like we talk about the analogies of it in a pebble in water.
Mm,
And also our virus,
mm,
how that is passed around and how many people from one person can get it and how quickly.
mhm,
And that same goes true with this act.
mm,
And all the effects are not like it
mm,
at all.
mm,
And when you first gave the assignment, and I thought, oh no, another homework assignment. So I really thought about all of that. That was really a complex thing. And I thought, oh, how can I do that job? Well, I won't show up. Well, but having said that, yes, this coronavirus has changed our, how do I say, way we do many things. And I am pretty much self-contained as much as possible, but I really thought it over and how I could cause that ripple effect. So I came up with this plan, and I've tried it 3 or 4 times with an amazing results. And that is to call people I haven't talked to in a long time, those I even have. And I kind of gave them an assignment. First of all, how I did it, I'll tell you later, and I'll make this as quick as I can. But I decided that it would be kind of like I would tell the other person that I hadn't talked to in a long time, whether it be somebody on a Christmas list or whatever, or all of the phone calls on my cell phone. It didn't have to be a friend. It could be an acquaintance from when. And you give them at least 2 comments about their personality that you enjoyed or you noticed that was unique. And be honest about it. I mean, don't just flattery. And then say, I decided I had to do something when I'm alone, but how could I help others? So I picked my favorite number. I don't know about you people, but my family all have a favorite number. So whatever it is, mine is 7. So I said, I decided if you would take your favorite number between 1 and 10, that's reasonable, and called at least that many people and have that conversation and ask them to do the same with your own number. And the effects I have gotten have been outstanding. There are people alone, there are people in trouble, people who have had surgery, people I haven't talked to, and they said, I can't believe you called me. You made my Christmas. It is astounding. Yes, that made me feel good, but I want them to spread it. And that's what I said. Well, then this is your homework. So I copied you, Lawrence.
Yeah, there you go.
But I'm trying to think, I do have to keep my safe distance, as we all do, in our masks and so forth. And having said that, I thank you.
Well, you're welcome. That's the whole point of these things, is like we have some new experiences, and hopefully they are profound enough for us each personally that some of them anyway we duplicate or replicate and keep doing it, because that's where we start to get the kind of built-in benefit, is because we actually put the things into motion. You know, if they're just intellectual cocktail talk, well then, you know, I think we cheat ourselves. But if we can just after we learn a new thing or get a new idea, incorporate those new ideas into our lives and into the lives of others, then these conversations have a lot more meaning. Well, thank you for sharing that, Lee. Anyone else want to go? Connie looks like she wants to go. She's chomping at the bit. But you weren't here last time, but I'll bet you have some acts of kindness that you have done recently.
Well, I guess, like you said, I wasn't here for the assignment, but I do appreciate seeing the notices of your meetings each week, and I'm glad I'm finally able to join one of them. I'm working on a lot of stories about different things with Christmas traditions and just ways that people are trying to connect with the holiday season. So I appreciate that. But last year at this time, a couple of my friends had gotten together and made lessa, and it was just really a great, outpouring of community and stuff like that. And it was like, this year has been hard for some of them. So I guess I reached out to some of those women that had shared their their traditions with me at that time and just sent them a quick text note saying how much I appreciated that last year and how much that meant to me, especially in a year like this. And a couple of them had lost family members, and just making note of that. And those that I had sent that note to just really expressed the fact that, you know, that they appreciated being thought of it this year. So I guess that's kind of the same ripple effect that you're talking about. And then being able just to continue those conversations, you know, with the rural people, it's hard to get together. You know, the farming community, I think, tries to support each other. We had an incident where we needed help from family or from other farmers this fall, and, you know, they dropped everything and came to help us out. So just writing a thank you note to those people too, and just saying, you know, we appreciated the fact that you dropped what you were in the middle of and came to our help. So just trying to show appreciation and reach out in those ways.
Mhm. That is so wonderful. And you know, the thing about this ripple effect, I think Lee and maybe Barb as well, they alluded to, you know, there's the idea of how easily a virus spreads. Um, Acts of kindness can spread the same way. You know, they have the same kind of effect. You know, and when you consider that we are all 6 degrees of separation, as the calculation goes, from every other person in the world, there's 7.5 billion people, and we probably can trace some way that we know pretty much through these various linkages, everybody is connected. That's why the virus can travel so fast, because we are all connected. If we were all as isolated as we feel, then we wouldn't have any programs. We wouldn't need them, because we would all already be self-isolated. But we, in fact, are not isolated. We just don't recognize how connected we are. And it's that absence of recognition of our connection that makes us feel lonely, when in fact we're not really alone. You know, there's always people who are doing things for, to, with us all the time. So it's good to keep that in mind when we are committing acts of kindness, that it isn't just that one person that we are affecting. Well, first, there's two, because we're affecting ourselves too. But that person will go on to affect someone else. And because we get usually a good feedback from that, a good feeling about that, we will go on to commit other acts of kindness. So there's all kinds of ripple effects there. Anyone else? Betty, you look like you should be going right about now.
I was reaching for my microphone. First, I want to remember to deliver a message from Naima, who is in training this week. She's been called back into service for the census, and it's something she did 10 years ago and hasn't been involved in. So she's going through some kind of grueling training that she's able to do at home. And she wanted me to tell you, she said she kind of had a hard time finding a random act to do, but as she and her husband were leaving a doctor's office a few days ago, she noticed a woman pull up and park close to the sidewalk where they were walking, and the woman started to slide out of her van, and she saw them, so she stayed in her place and just watched as they came by. Naima and her husband, if you can imagine, they were having animated conversation, and so they walked on by, and I think Naima said she kind of met the eyes of the woman in the van and smiled behind her mask. And then as she got past the lady and saw that she was really indeed waiting for them and giving them their distance, Naima turned around and called out to her and thanked her for doing that. And so they connected in that way.
Mm.
And so that was the best example she could think of having acted out herself. And I was having, I have to be frank, I'm busier now than when I'm not quarantine myself. I'm putting myself through college. I think I'm reading all these books that I'm so interested in and cleaning out nooks and crannies that I haven't visited in my home. So I didn't even remember this until I got to my announcement. And then I thought, oh, I have an assignment. But now hearing Barb and Lee and Connie, I realized, I guess I was thinking these had to be truly random, maybe people I didn't know, meet them on the street kind of thing or at the supermarket. Uh, but a couple of things come to mind. One of my friends from out of town was in town the other day, and we agreed to have a conversation out on my patio because it's distance and it's outdoors and we wear our masks. So we were out there chatting away, and I was sitting where I could see the mail carrier across the street and down half a block. And he was wearing a Santa Claus hat. And I didn't know who it was because we kind of have, different ones from time to time. But I said, Connie, look at him. And she turned around and I called out and I said, ho, 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 or something, and then she called Santa Claus, I wasn't sure. A lot of them, they have their headphones in but he looked up and then he started coming toward us and we're back, behind half of my house. But he came all the way over to acknowledge our greeting. And then I recognized him as one of the really outgoing mail carriers that you often see on Main Street. And he used to be my carrier regularly. So he was thrilled that we saw him and spoke to him. He came over, met my friend, chit-chatted a while. We discussed the COVID, of course. And it was just, I think the ripple effect I think happened for him was it lifted him. Not that he needs lifting. He's a very self-sufficient, happy, outgoing person who carries happiness with him. But I can't help but believe that it made his day brighter. And as he went on through the day, he remembered that we two smiling ladies called out to him and beckoned him to come and be part of our circle for a moment from a distance. And now I have been mailing a few cards and I have a long list and I'm not real diligent about it, but I had just put one out, a note in the mail, hoping the clothespin holds with the wind blowing. I happened to remember that the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate has a weekly newspaper that I love, but I forget about it. It's online, it's free online. And the publisher is a friend of mine, and I haven't seen him in probably 2 years. So I said, well, I'm going to send a check and subscribe so I won't be missing out on this. And I know my brother Bill will enjoy it. So I had just put that out there, but I wrote a note in it to Chuck because I assume that he will see it and somebody will call it to his attention. So I feel like I have reconnected with him, and we've been friends all these years, but just haven't talked to each other. So I'm going to double down on the card writing, and I've also done some really good phone calls, like everyone else has mentioned. A friend who's very ill out in Yakima, and I hadn't seen her playing our Scrabble games for 5 days, and I was afraid she was dead. So I called and she was very much alive and in much better humor than I would have been had I been as sick and troubled as she is. So that was good for both of us. I was so gratified that she's still alive and doing her best to stay that way. So now that I've woken up again to this project, I'm sure that I'll be more aware and I can do more. There are times when I really do just sit and stare into space, and I can make some better use of that. So thank you all for the inspiration.
Very interesting, and some very noteworthy things that you said, Betty. One of them is you were talking about the mail carrier and how one would think that he's upbeat, he doesn't really need cheering up, but it's surprising how many times they do need that.
Mhm.
uh, because sometimes people do that as a way to kind of lift themselves up and not let themselves go into depression. It is a solution, and it pretty much works to keep you from going into depression. But the underpinning of someone else recognizing that you are up, or just recognizing you, has profound effects, you know, because, you know, it's kind of like if you're sitting at home and you're upbeat and, you know, all the time by yourself, it's a lot different than if you're upbeat and someone else appreciates that, you know, if you're feeling good. And also that if you're not so feeling good, someone else can say, are you okay? You know, or if someone appreciates that you make that effort to at least spread some cheer to other people, not just yourself, but somebody recognizes that you actually went to the trouble of putting on a Santa Claus suit and parading around the neighborhood so that people would get a little bit of cheer somehow, you know. You know, like sometimes people do these like pop-up concerts, you know, um, and they will, you know, sort of like go to a supermarket, a choir will go to a supermarket and go to different places in the supermarket and then spontaneously all start to sing, you know, and nobody expected that. They only sing like that one song, Jingle Bell, but suddenly the whole supermarket is alive with song. People don't forget that easy, you know, they don't forget it easily. So that, you know, that kind of acknowledgement of people's effort to do something kind, it that also is an act of kindness, you know, because it has far-reaching effects because now it encourages people to do that again and to be comfortable with it, and it works toward normalizing being kind. So those things are like they're really important to do. And your point about the cards, that is so uh, useful, you know, because the phone call is also wonderful. People, the human voice is something that, you know, people can find comfort in, especially if it's a known voice and someone you know, initializes with a voice, but then there's ears on the other side to listen to you. You know, that kind of connection, that's what keeps us grounded, I think, as human beings, you know, knowing that we're part of humanity and being reminded that we're not alone, even though we may feel alone and we may be feeling loneliness. That little spark of somebody calling, even if it's irritating, but irritation is a lot easier to deal with than isolation and loneliness, you know. So and it doesn't have to be an hour-long conversation, you know. It could be even 5 minutes of just catching up and just letting a person know that I see you, I remember you, you are important enough for me to whatever else I could be doing, I'm talking to you right now. Of all the things I could be doing, I'm talking to you. So that means at this moment, it's you and I. That means something to people, you know. So great. Anyone else?
Yes, I'll do one very quickly. This is
Mm,
Alphonse.
mm,
So I'll mention a couple of ones that I did, but there's one that I really would like to do in the future.
mm,
Across the nation, I think we have Tuesday Give Day. And so this past Tuesday, I was able to give or start a recurring small gift to a couple of organizations that I participate in, but don't always necessarily contribute to them. And that was part of what I did. And there was a few things that I did that were a part of the assignment. But the one that really I want to share with everyone is one that I saw on the CBS morning show, where it talked about a couple that asked on TikTok for people to contribute whatever they could, 50 cents, a dollar, whatever, 25 cents, such that it would be able to be given to white people, who are suffering around the nation.
Mm,
And so people donated like mad, 50 cents. I like the idea of 50 cents being a nice donation in some ways, but whatever people could afford, they submitted.
Mm.
And then the couple, husband and wife team, went about to local restaurants and gave waiters, just at random, $500
mm,
from the
mm,
money that they had collected. And
mm,
I want to do that here in Colorado.
mm,
I would like to see if I can get one of my friends who might know how to set up a TikTok account to be able to start collecting such funds, and then sort of work in this area that I live in, the Boulder County, and just sort of go around and share the wealth of others in a random way.
mm, mm.
So
Before you get off of that one, can you at some point after you finish it, can you put in the chat any kind of link to how that works? Because I think that would be a very interesting thing to be able to initialize.
okay, I won't be able to do it right now, but I'll send it to Ryan. I'll have to look it up on, the CBS Morning News show, and then send that link to Ryan, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, and then we can, and maybe by next week we can put it in the
Okay.
chat, something like that. Okay.
All right.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That was all. I just wanted to get to that
okay.
one, because that
Oh,
one was
okay.
pretty exciting to see that happen, given our discussion of random acts of kindness. And look at this. This
Mhm.
was a pretty good one for people who truly are in need, who depend upon that kind of kindness that we give when we would go into restaurants, but we're not going into restaurants nearly as much.
Mm,
So
mm. Very interesting. And I could see a whole bunch of other opportunities using that model, Alphonse. And one of the things I really like about the model is, aside from it being a good name for a pop star, 50 cents is a good amount that nobody misses. I mean, or few people will miss 50 cents, but collectively, it turns out to be a thing. You know, so I like the idea of the low ramp. It's like everybody can participate. And I remember back in the beginning of the internet, some of us go back that far. One of the problems that people thought that they would have is monetizing the internet, because at that time the credit cards, well, that was a whole new project. And then the credit card processing fees were designed in such a way that they really were for purchases of like $100 or something like that. On the merchant side, you could charge anything you wanted way back then. But on the merchant side, they had to pay a minimum fee for every transaction, starting with like 50 cents, right? And sometimes it was like $1 or $2. So the merchant couldn't sell anything that was like 50 cents, because that would be just taken in processing fees. Well, it took the porn stars to figure out that, well, we can gang these things and figure out a way to monetize that. And so now you can buy, uh, all kinds of things for small. So I think it was that lowering the ramp, lowering the cost of entry, so that someone who doesn't have $5 to spare, but they do have 50 cents, they can participate. And then of course, like the model in the I'm reminded of the eBay model, where people would say, okay, I have this item and I want to sell it for $500, or they'll say the starting bid, for example, is $100, and they couldn't get any bids. Nobody would bid. Then they would back it off to like $10. They would get bids, and then pretty soon the thing's selling for $500, whereas before they couldn't get a $100 bid, because the ramp was low. So you could get into the game. And then once you got into the game, well, you could start rethinking about how much value it was. So I think in that same way, these low ramps offer us a way to spread random acts of kindness, which gets back to the postcard or the letter. Those are low ramp entries, where it costs you to stamp and the envelope and some time, and it doesn't have to even be a long letter. It could be just a, hey, how you doing? And was thinking of you, or some people do, they'll post a joke or something, or one lady I know, she had a thing where she would write you a postcard, then she would put a little coupon good for at least one hug, so redeemable on site,
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are those are really good opportunities, I think. I'm happy you brought that up. Anyone else have a random act of kindness that they would like to share? Ryan?
So I don't know if this is like super random, but I did something for one of my friends. And it was just a really small gathering of people who have already been around each other. We don't go out and stuff like that, but I threw my friend a little surprise party for his birthday last weekend. And I just noticed he's not always the type who's like outwardly saying a lot of like emotional stuff or anything, but I could tell he was really touched by it, and I bet he thanked me like 5 times. And what I noticed was that I had such a good time myself, that it was kind of like, okay, that's not really why I did it, but that kind of became my reward, which kind of shows me that, the more you put out there, the more you get back, which I think relates to all of this. So yeah, it was really satisfying for me in a lot of ways, and I know it meant a lot to him. So
Yeah. Those kind of things are really important in terms of like people that and redefining random, it isn't necessarily that it's a person that you don't know. It can be a person that you know well, but it's kind of a frame of mind more than it is an act, because the act is just sort of like where all of the things come together and you become aware of it. But if you're in a frame of mind that in the background you're always looking for an opportunity to help people or to help someone, then it becomes random because it wasn't planned. It's just an opportunity showed up or didn't show up, but you showed up, and then you do that thing. And it's important, I think, in this whole concept, one of the things that's important to remember is that the reward is in the act. You take the transaction out of it, and the reward that you get is actually the feeling that you get from doing it. That's why, like in my practice, I have this principle that if I'm feeling particularly proud, or have to extend my arm so I can pat myself on the back, then I shouldn't do it. I really should get to the point that it's just work. At least I try to work toward the state that is just me. That's what I do. That's who I am. That's what and I'm doing it because I feel like it, not because I may go to heaven or something like that. You know, if you go to heaven, fine. I mean, whatever it takes. But for me, I'd like to do it just because, and that's the end of it, you know, because in the process of doing that, what I do is, at least my intent is to make it normal in a little bit more normal in the places that I go for people to be kind. That's my contribution. It's like I'm not building the whole building, but I did bring some nails, you know, and maybe I just leave the nails, but those nails were used when they're used in the building. That's my contribution. I can forget about that. I can, you know, because it's such a small thing. That's why I like Alphonse's idea of the our example of the 50 cents, you know, because it should be, I mean, we can grow to it $50 and it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? But we can start with what we can manage and not feel like particularly strained. You know, it's kind of like Tai Chi. You do like slow movements, and all of those movements, little by little, they loosen up the joints without like stretching them and putting them under pressure or anything like that. But over time, you gain strength not only externally but internally too. Your internal organs, all of those things start to change. But it's like really low stress. You know, it's how can I say, you're morphing into this new character of kindness, a whole new level of kindness, because you slowly sink into it, so to speak, and it becomes you. You become it. At least that's the image I like to have when I'm thinking about those kind of things.
I want to remark, if I may, Lawrence, about what you just said, because I am a prime example. I'm not bragging about this. I'm just saying that you mirror what you've received. I have had many things in my entire life that have been, people say, you're the strongest person. I thought, no, I'm not. But I have many, many people that have reached out and supported me and helped me when I have been alone and going through I can't even tell you in the last year. I can't even begin. Even somebody I met through a book group and we just clicked. She was from Romania and she came to my deck. I entertained on my deck this summer. And she came with her violin and serenaded me. And I invited a neighbor over for a half an hour. She's brought gifts with her friend, brought them to my house and said, there's things outside your door for you, be groceries. I have had people that, how do I say, because of that, picked me up and took me to the symphony. I've had people, neighbors, do things for me, worry about the cold. I had somebody just yesterday said, what are you doing for Christmas? I have no relatives here. I live alone. You know, I have a husband. And he said, are you doing anything? What are you going to eat? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, we'd like to bring a plate full of food. We can invite you over for Christmas. It'll be at such a time. So having said that, I try to mirror that because it feels like I'm giving back or spreading it. So it's not necessarily money. It might be your voice. It might be a smile, anything, a recognition, somebody that you're walking by. There are so many, it opens up opportunities for all of us to put the change of mind in what we as humans need to do for our society.
Mm, mm, mm.
Thank you for this subject, Lawrence. And I do have to leave because I have to be
No.
at 10:30. But thank you. And I don't know, South Dakota Humanities, what's your name?
Ryan.
Ryan. Thank you to,
Mhm,
and Connie, Alfonso,
mhm.
Betty, who did I forget? Paul hasn't said anything yet.
Not yet.
And then
We're
there's
working for it, Paul.
bye, guys. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for
You
coming.
bet.
Yes. Well, since your name came up, Paul.
I'm here. I'm here.
Well, we we're talking about recent acts of kindness, and maybe you've heard some of the things that people have said. So we're just going around now and getting a check-in, and I'm also looking for, like, how did other people respond to your acts of kindness, if you know, you know.
So I guess I'll take the mic here for a second. I saw that this was part two, and that we were supposed to be ready to present something today. And I was like, oh shoot, I don't think I have anything. But then as I was thinking about it, I was walking my dog earlier this week, and there is so I live in a pretty in Los Angeles in a neighborhood that has lots of homeless people. And so there's this gentleman in his wheelchair on a corner as my dog and I were cruising around, and I was listening to an audiobook. So, and I could see that he was kind of flagging me down. So I'd stopped and started chatting with him, and he was looking for a renewable phone or rechargeable phone charger. And so he wanted me to look up one at the Home Depot nearby, and spent a couple minutes with him and couldn't find what he was looking for. And then it occurred to me that I had one at home, which is a couple blocks away. So I said, okay, why don't I just go home and get mine and you can have it. And he's like, well, how much do you want for it? And I said, no, you can just have it. It's my gift to you. And then he said, well, since you're going to be walking by that Starbucks, will you take this $5 and buy me a cup of coffee? And I said, well, I'll get the coffee too, no problem. And so went home, got the phone charger, stopped at Starbucks, got the coffee. And as I'm walking back up to this gentleman, he hadn't moved, of course. And he's got another guy who's on his phone looking up the phone charger that I was supposed to be getting for him too. But I dropped his coffee off for him and the phone charger, and said happy holidays, and went along my way. But as I looked down at him when I was giving this stuff, I noticed that he had several cups of coffee and several chargers in his bag. But still, I mean, he was in clearly he needed the help, and so I feel good about it. But I also was thinking, I talked to him for about 5 minutes, and I didn't realize that he had these things in his bag already. But I think that qualifies.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing too is there's a few things in that you said. One, when people say they need something, they may be having a market. Like, maybe I need some more for my store. I'm running out.
That's exactly. Once I
so,
realized.
And so we draw the conclusion that he needed it because he needed to charge his phone. But it's like, no, I need it for inventory because that's how I make a living. I said, well, okay, well that's a good price.
At the end of the day, he needed the charger more than I did, and he needed a cup of coffee. His other cups were empty, so I mean, it all worked out.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to remember too, is that when you do it, you're doing it for you. Is to convert it to that. So if you have it to give, you do it. If you don't have it to give, you don't. And like you're saying, I know myself, I'm often looking for ways that are places that I can give away stuff because I have too much stuff, and I'm, it's only because I'm trying new stuff all the time, and I get the stuff that I need to try or experiment with something, and unfortunately, I can't like buy just a one thing I need. For example, I needed one like silicone brush, okay, to paint something, and I needed a silicone bristles, okay, but I couldn't find any place where I could buy the one brush. I had to buy like, I think it was like 50. So, oh, what? I don't really need all those other brushes, but I still have them, you know? And so things like accumulate for me like that. So I think there's a lot of things like that, you know, like sometimes food is a good example where they just sell it, you know, they sell three of the things, but you only need one for that recipe. So, but you can't buy the one. You have to buy three. And so now you got the other thing, and that's wasted food. Well, I'd be happy to give that more than happy to give it to someone, because otherwise it becomes food for the animals in my refrigerator. So, uh, but if you're just doing it, you know, so if you're doing the acts of kindness because they, those acts of kindness build something in you, you know, then where it goes after that, how the universe handles it after that, I don't think I can even keep track of, let alone take responsibility for, you know. But it's a way of thinking, really. And that was interesting that your explanation or about the reaction, you know, to and the episode that was involved in that. I appreciate that input. And do you have anything that you can contribute to our conversation? Is she there? She might be on the phone or something. Okay, so I'd like to go back again now, and if Anne comes back, we'll catch up with her. But I'd like to explore again, like more examples of how an act of kindness, whether it's this past week or other times, what's been the reaction of people that you've been kind to? What are some, can you give us some kind of narrative about the exchange or what happened between you and the other person?
I want to share one part.
Hmm.
So when I did my contributions for Give Day, I could have checked off that I wanted my name to be in some sort of recognition book, and I decided I didn't want to do it. I just wanted to be completely anonymous. I mean, not completely, because they have to be able to take the money out of my account. But I didn't want the recognition in a public way. It just really struck me that no, that's not the point.
Are you still there?
Yep, I'm done.
Oh, okay. It was scratching, and then you suddenly your voice went out. So I was just thinking maybe I was wondering if your mic got cut or something. But
no, were you able to hear what I said though?
Yes.
About not wanting rec? Okay, good.
Yes, right. But and there are a number of ways. Interestingly enough, you bring that up, that and those kind of public things like that. Not, you know, this doesn't necessarily apply to you know, when you just meet somebody or something like that. But in those public things, I had a feeling the same way as you did, Alphonse. That was my initial thing. And then it was pointed out to me that there's this herd effect that people have, that if they see that someone else is giving, they're more likely to give. And if they see somebody that they know has given, they're even more likely to contribute. Okay, so then I then started to balance, well, my need for anonymity and my desire to help further the cause of this organization or something like that. You know, it like signals to your network that you think that this is a valuable thing. So there was that. And then the other thing is as you give the people that you, let's say, promise something to. For example, there was one organization, a lady asked me to help in her fundraising thing by organizing a team. And I said, you know, I really don't have time or headspace to organize a team, especially with people I don't know, or trying to, you know, that takes quite a bit of time commitment that I just don't have. But I appreciate the kind of work that you're doing, so I'll just send you a check, right? So I just to let her know that I followed through, then I kept my name on the thing so she could see that I didn't just sort of blow her off, you know, and say, you know, just that I really did follow through. But fundamentally, I agree with Alphonse that, you know, and to me, I find, or not so much agree, I follow the same pattern, is that sometimes it's most of the time actually it's more fun to do it and they don't know where it came from, you know. Because the other thing is it reduces the for me it reduces the likelihood that they will try to pay me back because I already have enough stuff, you know. I mean, if I was in need of something, there would be a transaction, but I already have too much stuff. So I don't want people to pay me back, you know. I'm doing fine, you know. So I prefer to especially the people that I'm helping. I don't mind getting help from people who they have it to give. You know what I mean? Because that positions me to give it to other people to redistribute it. But the people that I'm giving it to, most of the time, they don't have it to give. So I don't want them to even know where to give it back to. Just pay it forward. Just go and do something else for someone else, but don't give it to me. So I appreciate the model of anonymity. Betty.
I've had that same discussion with myself because I always kind of have to guard myself against being prideful or boastful. So occasionally I'll have a GoFundMe thing pop up, and I have that choice to make when you make the donation. Am I going to be anonymous or not? I, like you said, Lawrence, I sometimes feel, because I have a pretty large list of people who see my Facebook page posts. It's open, and I have, you know, I could compartmentalize where my relationships fit in the constellation of my community, and those are sort of cross-sectioned on my Facebook sometimes. I've noticed that over the years, and I love when somebody that's in that part of the country and another friend of mine over there who's completely disassociated except by Facebook, then they become connected, and that's great. So I sometimes do be public when I make a donation, because I know there are people who will see that coming from me, or, you know, giving that I've given and I've reposted the opportunity, who would never see it otherwise, most likely. And they have a certain recognition that, well, if Betty's, you know, if that's somebody she knows, cares about, I'll jump on that bandwagon and send my $50 or $10 or whatever I can afford. And then there are other times when I just want to be anonymous. I don't want anybody to think because I'm not well off. I mean, I am very well off in my way of thinking. I have a roof over my head that I don't have to worry about, and plenty of food in my pantry. But I don't have money to have people coming begging, anyway, I've said enough. But yeah, there's that dilemma every time I do decide to donate in a place that might be publicized. Well, I'm open and Ryan popped back and I wanted to ask him a question about that birthday party. What kind of party did you do for your friend Ryan? I'm assuming it was virtual of some kind.
It was actually in person, but it's just a small group of like 4 of us that
Oh,
see each other anyways, so it wasn't like a big um public gathering or anything. It's 4 of us that are really close friends,
mm.
and we do a lot for each other. So
Oh, so you surprised him by having everybody happy birthday him on the right time. Huh?
yeah, I just rented out our community room here at my apartment, and he walked in and we surprised him.
Oh,
So
that's great. I was
yeah,
curious because I've seen people doing drive-bys and then of course the Zoom meetings work for things too, but that's really nice. It was low key,
yeah,
everybody was comfortable and he
yeah,
was thrilled with it.
yeah. He was really happy. I had another friend of mine who, for his 40th birthday, his wife had a bunch of his friends just send him a short video with some memories of like, just about anything, or tell a story or anything,
Oh,
just because of the social distancing. And he got like 20 some videos, and he was thrilled. And that occurred to me, that it's like we spend so much time just, I don't know, whether it's on social media or just like doing random things, when there's those kind of valuable moments that are out there where you make somebody's day or week or month or year just by sending them a video message. Kind of like the thing Lee is doing. It's like you're just taking even 3 minutes of your day to say something nice about somebody, and what you appreciate about them, and um, things like that. Like, for example, I should probably thank Paul for getting me hooked on the Grateful Dead. Um, about 3 years ago, he had me come to Boulder, and he let me stay with him, and now I listen to them pretty much all the time. So thanks, Paul.
It's for everyone.
I give him something to do with valuable time, because he got to listen to Grateful Dead, and he probably is not old enough to really understand the Grateful Dead.
That's
from the
right.
roots. From the roots.
That's right.
Yeah, you have to go back to Pigpen days.
Although I will say the ancestry is in the roots, because my dad was in Palo Alto in the early to mid 60s.
Oh, okay.
When they were getting going, and he talked about being at parties that the Grateful Dead as the Warlocks a few times played too. So
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a different conversation.
It is. But speaking of random acts of kindness and the Grateful Dead, I would say that band built themselves on random acts of kindness. When you really get down to, they are a textbook case of building a business based on making people happy.
And Ryan can attest to this. Mickey Hart, one of the original drummers who still plays in the different iterations, at the end of every concert will say, take the energy, to paraphrase it, but to take the energy that we just created here and go out and do something good with it. Which I think speaks directly to what you just said, Lawrence.
Exactly. And that was the Grateful Dead right from the beginnings. That was, and it's interesting, and speaking of anonymity, they never made a thing about it. But I remember when a lot of the excitement in San Francisco around that whole music thing happened with the Grateful Dead putting on free concerts. And they would be pop-up concerts where they would like come to a public park, get a permit, come to a public park and put on a free concert. And it was those free concerts that attracted Bill Graham's attention, and he started booking them. And their career was based on, they built a whole following of people by doing free concerts in the park, and people started passing the hat to so that they could get bigger equipment. So because not enough people could hear them, you know, and they built a whole business around that, and all the other things you could go on, but that's a good example of how that whole ripple effect, and by trying to spread something good and joy and stuff like that in the community, and that created that whole Flower Children. Well, it wasn't by itself, they were just part of a movement, but they were an important part of a movement of like saying, let's spread this peace, love, and happiness, you know. And it worked until we start getting all those imports from New York that didn't like that vibe. And they kind of, they say, you guys are too laid back, and it was all of that. But for the time, you could see the ripple effect of those random acts of kindness, you know, the things, feeding people, those concerts raise money for the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, so where people, no matter whether you had a drug problem, whether you had a venereal disease, or you broke your finger, you didn't have money, you could go to the free clinic. And that was funded by those concerts that people would do, and they would pass the hat for the free clinic, you know, and they pass the hat for food for people, you know, all kinds of things. And all of these groups, and they started, and then other groups like the Country Joe and the Fish, Great Jefferson Airplane, and people like that started showing up as well to those concerts, and voila, they had money to do stuff. And they had, and as much, they created networks of people, just because those people, they liked those groups, they came together, they met people, and all kinds of things were spinoffs from that. So there again, you have that whole thing of ripple effects. So I've seen this stuff work over and over again. Anyone else with some examples of our narratives about a random act of kindness? Well, don't speak all up. I'll speak up at once. Well, I'd like you to think about this more. You know, next week we'll have a new topic, and momentarily we'll have Ryan tell us about that. But I'd like you to think about this some more and see ways that you can incorporate it into your life or lives. And keep in mind that it's not necessarily big things that you have to think about. Think about the little things that you can do, and you can do to the extent that it's no more noticeable in your day than, you know, I'd like to say washing dishes, but I'd never wash. I don't like, but an insignificant event, but you do it anyway. You know, the low hanging fruit of the day that you can pluck anytime. And as people have pointed out, well, we're kind of isolated, so they're not face to face things, but there are still the phone calls, there are still the cards, there are still things that you can send in the mail. There are people making efforts, like, you know, to feed hungry people or something like that. There are ways, but it's just now to bring it top of mind so that it's a thing that you think about maybe a little bit more often. With that, Ryan, what do we have on deck for next week?
So next week, we're going to talk about the art of enthusiasm. How does a person become enthusiastic about life? And we're going to have an expert on, who I am still confirming the details, but we will have an expert who can speak to all of that. And I also have a question, and I don't need an answer now, but I just want to float it out there to some of our regular participants. We were just wondering if we did this meeting at night, like at like say 7, if that would potentially work for people, because I know there's a few people who would like to attend but can't because of work reasons. So I just want to kind of circulate that, and if anybody has any feedback now, it'd be welcome. Otherwise, we'll just kind of bring it up in future meetings. I don't want to leave anybody out. So if that's an issue for anybody, just let me know. And we're not going to definitely do it. It's just kind of something we're floating right now just to get a few more people involved. So
Yeah, we chose this time initially. We chose this time because, well, we had to choose a time. And it was one of those kind of things where the COVIDs and COVID life was just beginning, and there were quite a few people who were at home for the first time, and it seemed like the thing to do is to have it at a time where it's like tea time, you know, a time when you know, like maybe it's after breakfast but before lunch, and you could have a conversation or something like that. That was the thinking. But there is some flexibility in that, and so that may be, you know, it may be something we want to consider. But as there are people already who are coming, there there are lots of people who have the same, as we say, psychographic. Their time, the way their day works is the same. So those people, they also have a need for conversation. So we're just putting it out there right now. How are people feeling? What, you know, about the time, so we can get a read on it and make some changes if that seems warranted. Okay. Well, with that, I think that's what we can do for this subject. And we'll see you all next week, same time, same station.
Thank you very much.
everybody.
It was very enjoyable and interesting.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a good week, everybody.
You too.